If you want to get good at this, typically what you have to do is put that to the side and just execute and keep executing, and then come up for air every so often and have a look. How am I doing?
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast. It's Walter here. Good day, Darren. How are you today?
Hello, Walter. How are you doing?
Great. So, Darren, I have this weird idea, and I'm really interested to see where this goes. So I have this theory. I've been thinking about it for, 3 or 4 years now, and I'm still trying to punch holes in this theory, and I can't come up with any, which probably means that, of course, I'm locked into confirmation bias or one of those cognitive biases that we're so aware of. But I'd love to get your thoughts on this and obviously apply it to trading. So here's my theory of everything. My theory of everything goes something like this. Every single disagreement, war, conflict, or issue you've had in your life is essentially due to one thing. And that one thing is that you want someone else or something else to do something that they don't do. So you're basically putting your expectations on others, whether that be, as a country or a president, you're putting your expectations on another leader or another country or whatever, a spouse, a relative, an employee, a friend. You put those expectations, you want them to do something, and they don't do it. And that's why you end up with all of these conflicts and issues. So the solution, of course, to this is to somehow disengage and allow others in your life to have freedom to choose what they want to do, which sounds kind of funny and kind of obvious, but we never do that. And that's my belief, is that in essence, if everyone were able to do that, just kind of let go, then what you would see is people would get along more. There wouldn't be as many arguments. There wouldn't be any issues. In fact, as the theory goes, there wouldn't be any at all. Now, some of you listening may think, well, if there aren't any expectations or responsibilities or anything like that, then you'd also have ultimate chaos. And I can see where you could say that, like if there were no laws or rules or policemen or whatever, making sure that people were doing what we want them to do. And I know, I understand that. But if you kind of, the context is if you have this idea that this is the theory of everything, every conflict, pain, and suffering has come from this, then how does that apply to trading? So that's kind of the jumping off point, Darren. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this idea.
It sounds a little bit like Buddhism, really, to me. Sounds like, this notion that what you want the most is what gives you the most pain in the end, and so like the outcome you desire the most is not necessarily going to be the best for you. Can you give me your view in terms of trading first, so I can, because I'm a little bit confused where to kind of put it in terms of trading. What's your view with trading?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Buddhism thing, obviously, I knew that would probably come up. One of the things that you find is when you dig into sort of Western interpretation of Buddhism, you see people talk about this idea of non-attachment, right? Which is typically meant or applied to the physical world, which I don't think, if you dig into the standard Buddhism teachings, you'll see that it applies to everything. So it's not just physical things. I think if you look this stuff up, this idea of non-attachment, because that's one of the things I've thought about. I studied religion a lot in when I went to uni in my 20s and did a degree in religion, just because I felt like it's good to be well rounded and see where everyone else is coming from in the world. And obviously, this idea of non-attachment comes really close to what I'm talking about. And some people would say that it's exactly that it is no different, and that what you're saying, Walter, is to practice non-attachment. And fair enough. That's cool if people want to do that. But I think when it comes to trading, it's a little bit different, because one of the driving factors for most traders is that they want to get from where they are today to someplace different. And I suppose you could say that about everything. One of the driving factors for students at university is they're at some place now and they want to get to someplace different with the degree. In theory, they think that the degree will get them there. And I think for traders, whether that is a big pile of money or some time off or freedom from your job or whatever it is, a little bit of work instead of a lot of work, when you divide up your hours of the day, whatever it is, traders are after something different from what they have. So they're kind of striving for something. That's my belief. And so if you're able to practice this idea, we'll call it non-attachment, which I think if you dig into Buddhism, I think they apply it to more than just material things. They also apply it to what I'm talking about, which is basically your expectations for others. So let's talk about this. So what would you do as a trader? Well, you would probably have practiced non-attachment for the next trade. So you don't care what the next trade does. You also might practice non-attachment for your trading account. Do you really care what your trading account equity curve looks like? Now, does this mean that you're going to take wild risks? Not necessarily, but you might not freak out if you're in a 9% drawdown. If you were to practice non-attachment for your trading career, then maybe you have no expectations for what's going to happen between now and 3 years from now, or now and 10 years from now. Are you going to get any better at this? In other words, you're just kind of focusing on the task at hand and not really looking further than that. Now, that might sound weird to people who set goals and have all these sort of Western ideals of if you want to get someplace, you got to do this, and that in sort of a logical fashion. But I think that's an interesting way to approach trading, because in essence, what you should be doing is just kind of focusing on the moment in sort of a really chopping wood for the sake of chopping wood type of way, and focusing on the execution of your trade. So you're not worried about what's going to happen 4 hours from now or 4 days from now when you find out what this trade ends up. Is it a loser, a winner, a break even? Do you get slipped? Do you pay a lot of swap? Those sorts of things. So that's kind of one way that you could apply this to trading. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you a bit more now. So it's kind of sort of thinking along these lines of, what we expect from the market. I think, we quite often plan how we're going to trade and have realistic expectations from the market. But when you're actually in the moment, all of a sudden our kind of subconscious expectations take over, and they tend to be unrealistic and not really in line with what you're really going to experience. So, as an example, you could backtest or trade a system and know what the sort of win rate was and your drawdowns. But when you're actually experiencing them on a subconscious level, you're kind of expecting to somehow the results to be much better than they really are ever going to be, and dealing with that in the moment can be an issue. And I like that idea about chopping wood, and it's kind of like that. You've kind of got to blank that other stuff out, although you can't really, because it's all part of the process. All the decisions you're making, you're kind of having to rely on emotions to make those decisions. And and there's also that kind of expectations of ourselves, I suppose, rather than others or the market. I think generally we all kind of view ourselves as being perhaps more skilled, or somehow more of a winner than the market is ever going to let us be. And I think that is an issue as well. I see a lot of people in trading who are highly skilled, successful people, well educated, well read, and I think that their expectations of themselves can sometimes be a little bit unrealistic as well. Yeah, I think with other people, I think that's really, we're talking about the market here, aren't we, rather than other traders. And certainly keeping those expectations in line is really difficult to do. And it's certainly a problem for me and the other traders that I work with.
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point, which I think that being successful in other areas, or being, quote, highly intelligent or whatever, or accomplished, I don't think that works. I think that's a negative. I really do, for traders. And the reason why I think that's a negative is a couple of reasons. Number one is, if you're really successful in business, sometimes the way that you do that is you're just completely ruthless, and you just want to destroy, and win, and do whatever you can to do that. And I don't think that necessarily translates well in the trading arena. I think, in other words, I think learning to lose and learning when to walk away is critical. And for some people who are used to just, that tenacious kind of crush the competition sort of thing, that ends up translating as adding to losers, or changing your position size after several losers to try and make all that back, martingale style. I think those sorts of characteristics work against you as traders. I know a guy who's a good friend who's a really successful businessman by any standard. He's succeeded in multiple arenas, and he keeps pressuring me to help him trade. And I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, we'll see. I guess I finally kind of relented, but we'll see how he goes, because I don't necessarily think that being someone who's been able to do well in other areas means you're going to be a good trader. There was a really good study done by Ralph Vince. Now, those of you who are familiar with the money management stuff in trading know exactly who Ralph Vince is. He's written those books on Optimal F and things like that. And supposedly, Larry Williams, when Larry Williams won a bunch of trading contests, he hired Ralph Vince to help him figure out the position sizing and the whole risk management for his trading accounts. Now, Ralph Vince did a study where he got 40 PhDs, and they weren't PhDs in statistics or mathematics or anything like that. So they're PhD students in different areas. So, and he gave them basically like this trading game, and they were trying to make money with a $10,000 account. Any guesses as to how many of them actually made money after the game was over?
5%.
Less, yeah. Well, let's see, 5%. 2 out of 40. What's 2 out of 40? That's
0.5%.
That's 5%. I think that's 5%. No, I think because 10% would be 4, right?
5%.
Yeah, it is 5%. You nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So it's true what they say.
So that's it. So it's true. I mean, it's so fascinating that these people who, in theory, should be able to work it out, right? They're smart people. It actually, it's crazy. In other words, it's crazy that the turtles were able to make money, right? And then these PhDs just was a complete washout. 2 out of the 40 actually made money. So to bring your point home, yeah, that's basically, I agree. I think that, having success in other areas doesn't necessarily translate. I think that wanting to win and doing everything, trying to win at all costs really hurts you. And I think that those who aren't, and hopefully this bodes well for me, those people who aren't necessarily intelligent, they're going to do, I think, better than those people who are highly intelligent, who probably have a little bit too much confidence and think that they can, quote, work this stuff out, this trading stuff out. So, yeah, it's an interesting, it's an interesting thought about this idea of just focusing on just the process, just chopping wood in order to get to where you want to go. So you're not really focusing on the process, you're focusing on the actual execution.
Yeah, and there's obviously something that happens in the moment, because, how many times have you heard someone say, well, I backtest the system, these are the results, everything looks rosy, and then a week later, somehow the system doesn't work anymore because they had a losing week. So there's something that happens in the execution phase where, the expectations get jumbled up, and it's like the subconscious expectations take over from all of the, study and fact and hard work that they've put in beforehand. Somehow that gets driven aside, and all the research suggests that it's emotions basically that cause that difficulty. And I think also there's like a time frame for trading that needs to play out, and it's like you need to go over a certain period of time before the actual expectations from your process start to take over those subconscious expectations. You kind of need the balls to kind of work through that, and I think you have to fail a lot of times and almost kind of get to the point where you've kind of run out of things to try, and just kind of stubbornly force yourself through that barrier, and then you can kind of start building these, I think they call it like the plasticity of the brain, where you kind of start to learn a different habit you've kind of forced yourself to learn this different habit, and then slowly but surely it gets easier to reduce those mistakes that you were making in the execution. I can't think of a better way to describe it, really, but it's almost like you say, you kind of just have to say, right, I'm just going to put my head down and chop wood and sort of like not look at the profit and loss for a while, and slowly but surely you kind of see things working out. And I think it's because trading systems need to play out over a longer period before you can see the realistic expectations, and then they kind of start to match with what you saw in the back testing. And something kind of happens to us before we get to that stage where it gets too much, and then we have to sort of sabotage and get out of this scenario and start again. And it's kind of weird. It's like we get right to the finish line and we kind of blow up before we can start to build those kind of different habits and different ways of dealing with the losses, if you like.
Well, that sounds familiar for like people who are unfortunately stuck in some sort of addiction, doesn't it? So if you're addicted to something, like take for me, it's always been ice cream, but for other people it could be cocaine or cigarettes or something like that. It's almost like you've got to hit that rock bottom, and then you claw yourself out of it and go, okay, I'm not going to be an alcoholic anymore, or whatever it is, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you've got a thing with ice cream, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. To be honest, I have. It's been 3 months, so I'm feeling like I've hit rock bottom, Darren. So I don't know, but yeah, it's been 3 months. So yeah, so that's the thing. Like, you look at some of these traders in the Market Wizards, and they rarely. I think there was only one that I remember. One trader I've ever heard of who basically made money from the get-go. Two, and so that I know of. So most of them have these horror stories of risking too much. I think what you were talking about earlier about chopping wood, about execution, and about putting your head down, I think that's much easier if you have a slightly less aggressive target. So if you look at sort of, and we could probably do a whole podcast on this idea of your money management and how you approach risk in your trading is essentially a glimpse into what you're trying to achieve with your trading. So if somebody is trying to achieve something spectacular, they have this great appetite for risk, and that might make it more difficult for them to put their head down and chop wood. I think your point about chopping wood is a great one, Darren, and I think that when you look at trading, one of the things that one sort of filter that you can look at trading through is that our money management, our risk management of our trading accounts offers a window into what we are trying to achieve as a trader. In other words, you could argue, and we could probably do a whole podcast on this, which is your risk management rules are essentially your trading goals defined. So I know it's kind of an extreme point, but I do believe it to be true. And so what you're saying here is if someone is chopping wood and just puts their head down and really focuses on the execution, which I believe is the key to successful trading, is to really make that your goal and your focus. That sort of person can do that if they have less aggressive goals for their trading. In other words, their risk management is somewhat tame. Now, somebody who has a very aggressive risk management system or rules in place, they are going to feel those drawdowns, they're going to feel those losing streaks more, and they're going to possibly give up sooner. So that's kind of the way I see it, is that there's that interplay between your execution and your risk management. If you don't have that risk management right, what ends up happening is it's basically you take your eye off the ball, to use a baseball term. You're not focusing on what's important because that risk management keeps getting you messed up because of if you're risking 4% a trade and you keep having these losers, okay, all of a sudden you're down 22% and you're freaking out. So this is the sort of thing I think you might have a perfect trading system for you. You might have everything in place and you might say, yep, I'm going to focus on execution. I'm going to put my head down and I'm not going to take a breather until I've put 50 trades in my account and see what happens from there. Well, one of the issues with that is if your risk management is wrong and it's too aggressive for your tolerance for drawdowns and all of that, then you're never going to get to 50 trades. You're going to give up before that. So that's one thing that I sort of noticed in other traders, is that, working with other traders, if they don't get that piece right, they can have everything else right, and they can basically ruin it for themselves because they don't understand what they're doing by being too aggressive with their goals, which is basically translating into risking too much.
Are you saying that it's a money thing, or is it the relative size of the loss? So is it because they're uncomfortable about the amount of money that they're losing? They're uncomfortable with those sort of figures? Or, is it just losing per se?
I think it's the amount. I think, in other words, so two traders are trading the same system and executing the same trades, let's say exactly the same, which is never going to happen, but let's say that's happening. One trader's risking 0.75%, and another trader's risking, 3%. Well, what happens is the guy who is risking 0.75%, he runs into a 7.5% drawdown, and the guy who's risking 3% per trade, he runs into a 30% drawdown. So now what happens? Well, the guy in the 30% drawdown says, the market's changed, or my system doesn't work anymore, or this sucks, I can't get this trading right, and he throws his arms up and he goes back to the drawing board. Whereas the guy that's in the 7.5% drawdown is able to dig out of that and ends up, positive on the month or the year or whatever. So that's kind of the way I see it, is that people get too aggressive with their trading goals, and that's translated into risk management, and that means that they're not able to execute.
So really the advice is that we should really stay small as possible until we've kind of built that sort of those long-term memories of executing something over a period of time and seeing the results of that before kind of increasing our size, because then you have those new habits built up, and it'll be easier to reference those feelings of letting things work over a longer period of time.
Yeah, and build up some wins. So the way that, and do it slowly. So the way that if you're afraid of snakes, what do? Well, they'll put you in a room with a snake, and then next week they'll put you in a room with a snake, and they'll take the lid off the aquarium, and then the next week they'll put you in a room with a snake, and you got to take 3 paces toward the snake. And so that's the same thing you can do with your trading. You do your back testing in Forex Tester, you do your forward testing in your demo, you do your forward testing in your small live account, maybe you get another live account that's a little bit bigger, and then you're in your sort of standard size trading account for that system. So you sort of build up, and along the way you build your confidence, you get all those trades under your belt. Yes, it's going to take longer. Yes, you're going to get, impatient. But the advantage is when you finally hit that payday of trading the real standard size account, you've got all of these executions under your belt, so to speak. So now you're good. Like you're going to be pretty good. Now you can still screw it up by risking too much and freaking out when you hit a drawdown, but the point is, yeah, it's basically what you're saying, Darren. You're building up all of these memories of success using that particular system.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to be a special and unique person then, really, to just kind of walk into trading and do the right things, because these are all of the human traits, I suppose you could say they're negative human traits that we've all got, being impatient, being greedy, wanting short-term, gratification, and we all kind of come with that. And I suppose it's unusual to find somebody that doesn't have, those biases and flaws in our character. It's why I always say, if something feels uncomfortable or sounds unusual in trading, then that's usually where the good ideas and the good information lies. And it's also why I always question trading ideas or systems or techniques that everybody seems to agree with, and stuff that is popular. It doesn't mean that popular stuff has no merit at all, but I'm always cynical or suspicious or questioning those sort of things now, because it's clearly what we're drawn to and what we want to naturally do are the elements that lead us down the wrong path and cause us to have so much difficulty trading.
Yeah, and that's why martingale systems are so popular, and trading systems where you win 1 out of 12 times but make an absolute mozza every time you hit the jackpot are wildly popular, but people just don't trade them. They're much more likely to be drawn to the martingale style of money management, and less likely to be drawn to that trading system that has a 7% win rate but has a 30-to-1 reward to risk ratio. That those are the sorts of things that you see in trading. It's riddled with examples of really good stuff that nobody wants to do and really bad stuff that everyone thinks is great. It's so true.
Yeah, and the stuff that really works nearly always has way more pain associated with it than we ever think the good stuff is going to have. You know, more losses, more drawdown, longer periods of losing. When I hear trend traders talk about having, you know, trend traders who've been around for, say, you know, 10, 20 years, and they talk about having a whole year of making no profit. And, you know, we listen to that, but how many of us could really trade that way? Could we trade all year and not make any money? And I think a lot of us couldn't afford to have a year without making money. A lot of us are looking for trading to be income, not just something that we're building, you know, savings, investments, spare money with. You know, a lot of us are coming into trading expecting to stop work and pay all of our bills and put our kids through school and go on holidays and buy the stuff we want, you know, and do that week in, week out. I mean, some of us are expecting it every day. Lots of us every week, and nearly all of us were expecting every month to be a winning month. You know, are we all trying to put a square peg in a round hole? We're trying to make trading something that it really isn't in reality.
Yeah, and people don't compound their money. People pull out, don't save. So if you have a really good month, they don't save a little bit of that. They just go, woohoo, you know. And it's typical, isn't it? Like it's almost like the bubble mentality or the herd mentality. Whenever there's a bull market in anything, everybody just kind of, you know, piles in and they're along for the ride. And, you know, and of course they draw a straight line. They go, okay, well, it's gone up this much in the last month. It's gone up that much in the last year and that much in the last 2 years. We know that gold is going to hit $5,000 by next Wednesday. I mean, it's obvious, right? I mean, those are the sorts of things that we do, isn't it? We always assume things are going to be the same. So that's which speaks to what you said. So if we had a really good month with our trading, we expect that next month is going to be the same. And if we had a really bad year with our trading, we expect that next year is going to be the same. But it doesn't quite work out that way, does it? So it's difficult for us to sort of stay the course when you have these issues, basically cognitive biases working against us.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, you know, you can plan out to sort of learn these skills, but none of us really go into trading that way. You know, we just want it too quickly. We want it too easily. We can't wait, and we can't deal with the pain. You know, I suppose that is why, like you say, only 5%, or whatever the figure is, eventually make it. Then on top of that, you actually need to have, you know, find a strategy with an edge, and it needs to be a real edge. And sometimes you can find something that works perfectly for a year and never works again, you know, strange anomalies. And so, you know, we're not painting a particularly rosy picture on people that want to trade. But I suppose, you know, that is to a certain extent the same with getting back to the original question, that you know, the stuff that we want the most, you know, is going to cause us the most pain in the long run.
Yep. And I think that's kind of the point here, is really, you know, this idea that all of our pain and conflicts and wars come from expecting something different on someone else. It's the same thing for your trading. So when you place these expectations on your trading account, and I know it's hard, it's difficult to do that, because again, that's the whole draw of trading, is you want something. You want freedom, you want away from your job, you want more money, you want to be able to travel. You don't want to have to sit down and work for 9 hours a day or whatever it is. You want to see your kids, you want to see your grandkids, whatever it is, that's what you want. But the ironic thing is that if you want to get good at this, typically what you have to do is put that to the side and just execute and keep executing, and then come up for air every so often and have a look. How am I doing? It's not coming up every 1, 2, 3, or 5 trades. It's coming up every 50, 100 trades and having a look to see how you're doing. That's the way to benchmark yourself and see how things are going. So yeah, I think that's basically, I guess, what I was trying to do here was take my theory of everything, which of course was stolen from Buddhism, right? I mean, we all know that Marconi didn't invent the radio because Tesla invented it at the same time and that sort of thing. So same thing here. My theory of everything obviously has been around for thousands of years, but I like to just I like to just pat myself on the back and say that I came up with it, when of course I didn't. But so you can apply this to trading too. So yeah, that was basically the idea.
Cool. Well, I suppose really, if I was going to start again and I wanted someone to give me a tip, then I would say, you know, do your back testing, and then perhaps like build a spreadsheet with like you say 100 trades on, and say, right, you need to fill this in. Before you do it, write at the top of the spreadsheet what your expectation for these 100 trades is based on your back testing. And, you know, what would have been great if I'd had someone who was, you know, almost like a teacher there, sat there with me, you know, at the end of each day saying, right, have you filled in your trades? Are you still doing it? And forced me to get through to the end. And I think in the long run, something like that, something simple like that would have saved me a lot of time and anguish, you know, the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Hear, hear. All right, Dan, we'll see you next time when we talk about chucking in the towel. So looking forward to it.
Okay, Walter, see you soon.